Welcome to the top 12 highlights from the media. Looking at chapter 9 in the online PDF, looking at chapter 10 in the book. This is on the media, the fourth estate. Our final linkage institution. Thank you for joining me on this chapter on the media as we look at the top 12 highlights from the media. Our last linkage institution in this unit and in this course is on the media. We have looked at political parties, the role of campaigns and elections, the role of interest groups, and now we look at the media, the idea of the fourth estate. You may remember libel. If the media is printing something that can be proven to be false, you can get damages. You can be awarded damages or cease and desist. You can force them to print a retraction, as well as pay damages. Slander would be something that is said about you that is false. Libel is something that is printed. Neither one of these is really helpful to an elected official. It's hard to prove libel or slander as a public official because you are in the public eye so much. But to a private citizen, it is much more easily found to have the favor of courts. Not always, but it is possible. Prior restraint is the idea of government censorship, government basically restraining a member of the press from printing or publishing something without government approval. We saw this with the Pentagon Papers, the Supreme Court basically saying that the government has no right to step in for censorship of the press. It is a violation of the First Amendment, freedom of the press to do so, and so prior restraint. We see more of that in school publications for students, the Hazelwood v. Kuhlmeyer case, in which student publications are limited in terms of censorship. We don't have that here in Montgomery County, but they do in other places in the country and in the state of Maryland. Political socialization, how do we come about finding out about politics and our role within it? Is how we are socialized in the media is a very important aspect of that. Selective attention. What media do we pay attention to? And selective exposure. What media do we choose to be exposed to on a regular basis that feeds the echo chamber of our biases, of what we see and view? And we're going to take a look at these as we look at the role of the media. So where do you get your news? Where does that news come from? That is important here in terms of how you get your news. Maybe it's on paper, maybe it's on your phone or on your tablet, online, if you will. But wherever you get your news, the media has a huge role in how they go about gathering that news and sharing it with us. Mass media is known as the fourth estate. This is the idea of any type of media out there, including recordings and films, books, and other publications. So it is pretty broad in terms of mass media. This also includes entertainment. And so watching Comedy Central, for instance, to get your news, again, taken with a grain of salt, of course, but not your best direct source of news than other resources. And I would argue that all of them have a bias. Even the news, we see the nightly newscasts you see here with Lester Holt, all of them have some level of bias that they are bringing to the forefront. The importance is to be able to question and distinguish between, in terms of context, what is biased and what is not. That's really important here. And so there's a lot of blurriness between what is news and what is entertainment today. And with social media, we see even more of that. This underscores the importance of the roles of the media to serve as a watchdog, to investigate, to ask questions, to hold elected officials accountable. Also to serve as a gatekeeper, to inform us on what information is most important and prioritize that news in terms of what we really need to know this morning about what's going on in the world. And then also to keep score. To make sure that we know the background on what's happening here, the context of what is going on, and the importance of how that impacts the story that you're reporting on. All of these really important in terms of driving home the fourth estate, driving home the news message that the media is trying to parlay. Now, this has happened over time. We see the party press. If you go back to the days of even before the party press, Ben Franklin up there, the join or die die cut that was in his in his printing press that he printed along with the Farmer's Almanac on the weather forecast and what the crop yields were going to look like, that sort of thing. Then we fast forward to the party press era. We see a lot of those kinds of things rising again with social media today. The Jacksonian era, basically bucking all the trends and foregoing the way things were traditionally used. We fast forward to yellow journalism at the turn of the 20th century. You provide the pictures, I'll provide the war, said William Randolph Hearst, leading to the Spanish-American War. And that's still around. We still see yellow journalism. Not nearly as blatant as it was back then, but sometimes it is. If you're in the supermarket checkout line and see some of the publications, there's yellow journalism is alive and well. We see radio and television is nationalizing the news. The president using these media as a new form to really personalize their presidencies and really bring it home to the people. The fireside chats of FDR are a great example of this. JFK using the debate to really showcase the differences between him and Nixon in 1960. And then we see today, we see not just objective journalism, but investigative journalism and the role of social media and the growth of the influences that they have, not just with the internet, but also a number of other aspects of selective exposure. This idea of picking and choosing where we get our news from, and only from those sources, and we go back to those sources time and again, starting to serve as an echo chamber. We're hearing what we want to hear. We're seeing what we want to see, and not getting outside of that bubble. So we're then not questioning things around us in terms of why we believe what we believe and what reasons do we have behind that. And that really is a message for us in the 21st century. This idea of objective journalism coming out of the Spanish-American War, the idea of yellow journalism or sensationalism really changed with the emergence and the creation of the Associated Press. The AP created a wire service, basically having reporters around the country and around the world reporting objectively on the news, providing context, providing details, providing news now in terms of headlines, using a lot of phone lines in order to get the news out there. I remember being a news reporter back in college. And basically doing the rip and read for local news, coming from the AP, coming from the AP wire service, the news resources that they provided, and very much trying to provide objective journalism. And so we start to see that along with investigative journalism really taking shape. We see Woodward and Bernstein coming to light in terms of exposing stories around this Watergate break-in that ultimately led all the way to the President of the United States and President Nixon's resignation. It also leads to this watchdog we talk about with the Fourth Estate, the media, as being more adversarial press, and the role that the press plays in that. Much more so in terms of questioning authority. And even though we see candidate-centered campaigns, we do see reporters that are asking the tough questions. The elected officials may not always be answering them, but they are asking the tough questions. And this really is born in the 60s and 70s from this investigative journalism that we see. Now, along with that investigative journalism and that objectivity, we also see a shrinking soundbite. Look at this, a 43-second soundbite in 1968. Today, less than 7 seconds. In terms of what we see. I would say in 2020 it's probably even shorter than it was in 2000. But the idea here is that if you're having less opportunity, and remember, a soundbite is basically a quote from the person, elected official or whoever that is talking about a particular issue. How can you really say anything in 7 seconds? Well, you can't. And that's why advertising is so much more important. So with the Citizens United case, which we know unions and corporations are people too, they can advertise, they can send the message out, including longer clips of elected officials to give context as to what's going on in the story. All of these are contributing to the incredibly shrinking soundbite in terms of what we see here. So as it gets shorter, we also aren't hearing the context of what is going on behind that quote. We're just hearing the quote and taking it out of context. And many times, we don't understand what's going on because we don't have that context anymore. This is one reason why the Supreme Court wanted to not have cameras in the courtroom, because they were concerned that members of the media would take their sound bites out of context, and it wouldn't make much sense, and it would be on the news and would sound horrible because it was out of context. And so that is why we still don't have cameras in that courtroom today. With the advent of the internet and social media, we also see a 24-hour news cycle. We saw this with the Persian Gulf War back in the 1990s. The idea here was we had a 24-hour news cycle, CNN broadcasting around the clock, and a lot of other news outlets doing the same. We see a lot more fragmentation in the market. We're going to watch a particular viewpoint or a particular bias because all media have some sense of bias. The question is how biased are they, and what political bent do they have? But we continue to see this throughout a lot of social media, whether it's the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Snapchats, or the Instagrams. They all have some level of bias, and even who we follow in those feeds are biased, whether it's a news source or whether it's other people we're getting our news from. Television really changed politics, though. The idea of having a visual. Social media would really enhance that and reinforce it, because now you can watch it at any time. You can watch that clip over and over again on YouTube. And so not only do you have cable news, but now you have social media outlets that are airing these news stories all the time, and the news is when you want the news. The news is ready for you. So there's a lot of that. But again, we have a lot of fragmentation, a lot of narrowcasting. We see today that many people listen to talk radio, but listen to various aspects of their talk radio. It is very biased, whether that's to the left or to the right. We see selective exposure going on. We are selectively exposing ourselves only to those viewpoints that we favor, the echo chamber, if you will, hearing ourselves talk through the media broadcasts that we see. And this is dangerous because, again, are we getting the investigative journalism? Are we getting the objectivity? In many cases, the answer is no. This leads to sensationalism, and the social media context is really critical here in terms of sensationalism. We see a lot of stories, a lot of headlines, a lot of hype in terms of the media reporting out on and in some cases it's not media, right? It's people, different organizations pretending to be media that sensationalize the news. And so what we see is a very shallow, a very superficial point of view of news coverage, and it isn't objective, it isn't investigative, and it isn't contextual at all. The media does cover the horse race: who's in first, who's on second, who's the fastest climber kind of thing. This is very different in terms of horse race journalism from campaigns that covered the candidates. Now we see it as very candidate-centered. They're raising money on their own, so we're not hearing from political parties, and so now we have even shorter sound bites, even more packaged candidates in campaigns, and so we're seeing less of them. We're seeing more what the public persona is of them, and that's changing how people view and feel about elected officials and candidates today. Do we need a back to basics media model? If the function of the media is to provide a forum for people to exercise their points of view, to report the news, what is news objectively and investigatory in that respect? Should it be more entertainment? Should it be more focused on the public agenda and the problems that we face today? Or, as we've heard a lot of times, is it all bad news, and so we need to focus more on the highlights, but then people don't watch those things? Although people watch a lot of cat videos on YouTube, so maybe people would watch them, who knows? But there's a lot of socialization around these types of things today. And the question is, as that linkage institution of the Fourth Estate, is the media coverage working? And that really is the question. Are we seeing the pendulum swing back in the other direction in terms of in a few years the more investigatory and the more objective journalism than what we saw before? And here is one impediment, one challenge that might keep that from happening, and that is consolidation. Newsrooms are becoming more corporate. They're becoming more owned by corporations. There's a lot of consolidation in the media as a result of mergers and acquisitions. And newsrooms are finding it really tough to be able to make ends meet and to be able to to be able to make it profitable for them to stay open, even if they are a nonprofit. It's really hard for them to continue to publish and pay their reporters a living wage when advertising is drying up. People are going to social media and other aspects. And how do you get those eyeballs? How do you get those ad dollars? You get it by sensationalizing stories. And so is this killing objectivity and the traditional newsroom we've seen? This leads to a local desert of news in which many places don't have a local news source anymore. And it really is sad, having worked for local news back in college and in high school, working for a lot of news outlets locally. Many of them are gone and never to return. And so this creates a news desert. What isn't getting covered then? What stories aren't getting played? What questions aren't being asked of elected officials? If the job of the media is really to be the fourth estate, to be the reporter of the news objectively and investigatorily, and no one is there to do that, then are elected officials getting a pass? Are they getting an easy pass on this? And this leads to a fragmented media. We see this time and again. We have a lot of narrowcasts in terms of people that are being reported on. We see the regulation of the FEC, the media by the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. Now, cable channels aren't regulated the same way, but they are regulated. But they have a lot more leeway. And so does that lead to more bias? Does that lead to more sensationalistic journalism? It definitely does. And then again, when we have this fragmentation and we see this universe of multiple sources, we're seeing some big dogs really buying up, really scooping up a lot of news media outlets that are out there. And what impact is that going to have on the media universe going forward? Is that going to impact a reporter locally doing a news story? It has to. And how do you keep these news outlets profitable? Many cases, it's about looking for the eyeballs. So there is a growing conflict here among that consolidation and that fragmentation that is really leading us to wonder what is the future of news? What is the future of the media? The FCC, as we mentioned, is the regulatory agency that basically regulates the media. That includes print, that includes broadcast, that includes social media. All of these aspects, the Federal Communications Commission actually carries this out in terms of issuing fines or revoking licenses or taking them completely off the air. And so they really are the regulator of the media, the watchdog of watchdogs, if you will. The last item to mention in our top 12 highlights from this chapter is the media in politics today. We see a lot of stars of the media, people who are news reporters but have their own candidate-centered news. And so as a result, they become the news. And we see the president using the media, in many cases, the bully pulpit, as we talked about, in terms of getting the message out there, staying on the agenda. We also see trial balloons being used to test ideas. Well, if the idea is a bust and it was horrible, we'll deny it. But if it actually holds weight, then we'll take it on as an idea of our own. Congressional coverage tends to be more negative, but many times it is a reaction to what the president is doing. Many times it's a negative reaction to what the president is doing. But most importantly, the importance here is that the media has a bias. No matter the media outlet, there is a bias in terms of every person is bringing their lived experiences to their jobs, to their roles, and to say that they don't have any biases whatsoever would deny their political socialization, and then they wouldn't be able to ask questions in that respect. So everybody brings a bias. It just depends on is it left of center, right of center, what is it? And then selective exposure and selective perception. Selective exposure is the idea that we're only exposing ourselves to particular messages from media that we want to hear. And so what do we get as a result of that? Well, we get selective perception. The idea of, see, I told you, this is exactly what's going on. This is the selective perception we're talking about. Why is it exactly what's going on? And you're like, yeah, see, I thought so, because that's the only thing you're listening to. So it creates an echo chamber of, yes, that's exactly what I believe. Or yes, see, I told you, that's exactly what I thought was happening. And this is a dangerous model because it allows elected officials to cater to those media sources, and they're not really having to answer to the objective media, to the investigative media that we once saw. And that's a very dangerous slope for a democracy. We need our elected officials to be accountable, whether they're Democrat, Republican, Reform, Independent, Moderate, whatever. We need our elected officials to be accountable, and we need the media to hold them to that accountability. And ultimately, the trust in mass media is really important here because, as you can see, there are ebbs and flows in terms of when we trust media, but we tend to like them more than Congress. We trust them more than Congress, which is in the teens and 20s. But we about half of us don't trust mass media in terms of those respects. And a lot of it is because of what we just talked about, the idea of selective exposure, selective perception of what the news is reporting. So how has the media coverage changed since 1960? Well, it is very mistrustful. Concerns about disinformation are out there. They are more adversarial. In many cases, they're very biased in terms of coverage that's out there today, whether it's on the left or on the right. There's a lot more biased sources out there that are promoting their viewpoints and their particular points of view. In this respect, we see sensationalism in order to get eyeballs, in order to get advertising dollars. They're shrinking those sound bites because they're not keeping viewers' attention. We see the focus is on the horse race, less on the candidate and what the candidate wants to do, which is always dangerous. And then the focus is really on the candidate themselves, and less so on what the focus of the candidate's agenda is supposed to be. And this is really the heart of why the media is so important. You really want to vet the people that are running for office and ask them the tough questions so that they really are the best person for the job, that they are the best elected official they can be. But we see so much bias in the media today that is really changing and affecting that, and it is a scary situation if people are just taking what they see at face value and not questioning the evidence before them, not questioning the context, not questioning the sources that they come from. And so lastly, I'll leave you with this idea of media bias. Does it exist? Well, look at these charts. The idea of media bias, we can see different viewpoints that are definitely espoused through the biases that we see here. Why is this helpful? Well, because we need to understand that we need to question what we read. If we're just regurgitating what we've seen and read, then we've missed the point and the importance of being politically socialized, of being politically attentive, and being an attentive public. We want to hear from media that espouse our viewpoints. Of course we do. But we also want to hear from media that is truthful and that is honest and has information that is newsworthy. This is really what we need to focus on. And so to listen to one side or the other or somewhere in the middle is not necessarily a bad thing, but we need to make sure that we are asking the tough questions, that we are coming back to what is objective, what is contextual, where are these sources coming from. That's the importance of the media. And the concern is that we're getting so many outlets on both sides that we're missing the message. We're missing the news that was really designed to be that fourth estate, that coverage of what's going on in politics and in government. I hope you found this helpful in terms of the top 12 highlights. Good luck on the upcoming assessments and ultimately on the AP exam.